Hi guys, today we're going to look at the Art of Horror Movies book by Stephen Jones. And there are a few sections we're going to look at. The ones we're going to look at are The Sinister Silence, The Thrilling 30s, The Frightening 40s, The Fearsome 50s, The Stylish 60s, A Satanic 70s, my personal favorite page, The Evil 80s, The Nasty 90s, and finally the 2000 Maniacs. Well then, let's start off with The Sinister Silence. A very popular movie from that time was The Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney Sr. as the Phantom of the Opera. I feel like this piece of art is really creepy. And we've also got art of We've also got art of one of the oldest horror movies ever, Nosferatu, which was known as the first vampire movie of all time. Now, if we shall, let's move on to The Thrilling 30s. This is one art piece of famous actor Bela Lugosi, who is known as Dracula back in the day. Really cool. Then we've also got our art of The Mummy, which I think is really cool. Then there's some art of Frankenstein, which I think this one is really cool in my opinion. We've also got some art from Bride of Frankenstein, which is really cool. And of course, some art from King Kong, of course, the original one, which is really cool. This is another art piece from Dracula, which I think is really cool. And now let's move on to The Frightening 40s. Our first art piece is from the movie The Wolfman, which is a totally original character, not like the other characters such as Frankenstein and Dracula. Another popular movie from that time was I Walked with a Zombie. And of course, Frankenstein meeting the Wolfman and them fighting each other. But we also can't forget this amazing piece that I found, which is really cool. And now let's move on to The Fearsome 50s. Now, a very popular character from that time was, of course, Godzilla, who has evolved into a better character, in my opinion. Another movie from the 50s was The Mole People, which looks really weird. A lot of sci-fi films, such as It Came from Outer Space, and, of course, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And, of course, this also amazing piece of art of Godzilla, which I think is really cool. Now let's move on to the stylish 60s. One of the more popular movies from the 60s was Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which is one of my personal favorites. But of course there were other popular shows such as The Addams Family and The Munsters. And now let's move on to the Satanic 70s. And of course we get the one, the only, Michael Myers, who I think is a really famous horror character, and this is an even better piece of art. Known as one of the scariest movies of all time, it was The Exorcist that released in 1973. The first Stephen King adaptation that came out in 1970. I actually don't remember, but the first ever adaptation was Carrie. And then later there was The Salem's Lot. Now we've got our favorite piece, The Evil 80s. And before we get to the page, I have to respect this really good art of Chucky, because you know Chucky's my favorite horror character. This is my favorite piece of art in this whole book. But some really popular movies came out in the 1980s. We've got Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, which is, of course, an adaptation of the book. Well, not really. We've also got An American Werewolf in London, which actually had an art piece at the very beginning of the book. And one of my personal new favorite movies right now is The Thing. Another popular character that came out in the 80s was Freddy Krueger, who made his first debut in Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. There was also The Lost Boys that released in 1987. One of my other favorite pieces of art in this book is the Beetlejuice one, which of course Beetlejuice came out in 1988. Same year as my boy Chucky. There's a bunch of other interesting art from movies such as Cujo, the Killer Dog, Evil Dead 2, Hellraiser 2, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now we're getting to the nasty 90s, which of course has a piece of art from American Psycho, released in 2000. Now right here we have a whole piece of Stephen King artwork, such as this one from It, and this one from Misery. Here's some Edward Scissorhands artwork for some Tim Burton lovers, and other slasher films such as Psycho 4, The Beginning, Jason Goes to Hell, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, Halloween 20 Years Later, and one of my personal favorites, Bride of Chucky. Other iconic movies that came out in the 90s were Scream, Scream 2, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, who actually starred someone from the famous movie Pet Sematary, Wes Craven, who also made Ghostface and Freddy Krueger. Of course, we can't forget It from 1990, which is one of my personal favorites. And our final page is the 2000s Maniacs, which has a page from the popular movie Saw. Some popular movies that came out in the 2000s were the remake of Carrie, the remake of Friday the 13th, the remake of Halloween, and the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We've got a whole Saw page right here with Saw 1, Saw 2, Saw 3, and Saw 4. These are some films from director James Wan, which are Insidious, Dead Silence, and The Conjuring. We also can't forget Annabelle, the Killer Doll. We've also got some other movies such as Get Out, Halloween, Us, and The Invisible Man. Some other movies from the Conjuring universe are The Conjuring 2, Annabelle Creations, The Nun, and The Curse of La Llorona. We also can't forget Annabelle Comes Home. This is another page of art from a popular movie by Guillermo del Toro, which is Pan's Labyrinth. We've also got a bunch of animated movies such as Corpse Bride, Coraline, Paranorman, Monster House, Hotel Transylvania, and The Book of Life. And that's really all the art I have for you today. I'll see you later.